Hi, and welcome to our 51st Kotlin tutorial, and in this tutorial I'll be talking about the secondary constructor. So secondary constructor is used when you want to initialize the members of your class in different ways. So basically in inheritance we use the secondary constructor, and how you can create a secondary constructor by using the keyword constructor. Now here you have the syntax for secondary constructor. First of all, I have created a class individual by using the keyword class. Then inside this class we have created two constructors, two secondary constructor using the keyword constructor. Then this is a constructor keyword. Then we have a parameter inside this constructor. Similarly, we have created another constructor which contains two parameters or arguments. The first one is of string type and the second one is of integer type. Then we can create constructors, we can inherit constructors from the base class. So for this purpose you have the syntax. First of all, you create a base class using open keyword and then the class keyword and then the name of the class. So inside this class I have two constructors. The first one contains a string and the second one contains a string as well as an integer. So now I have created a child class which is inherited from this individual class. So inside this child class I have inherited the constructors of the base class also. So how you can inherit the constructors? By using the keyword super. So now I have written constructor, the similar statement, the same statement I have written here, and then a colon, and then we have the keyword super which will inherit this constructor of the base class, and then we have our member. So now this member is the parameter of the base class constructor. Similarly, the second constructor is inherited. We have the same statement and we have colon, then the keyword super, and then we have the parameters of the constructor of base class. Now we have another thing. We can call a constructor from another constructor of the same class by using this keyword as we did in Java. So now it is demonstrated here. We have the syntax. We have a base class individual in which we have two constructors. The first one has one parameter, the second one has two parameters, and then we have created a child class which is inherited from this individual class. Then inside this child class I have created two constructors. I have inherited the constructors of the base class. Then here I haven't used this super keyword, but I have used this keyword, and this keyword calls the constructor of the same class. Then when this keyword is used, it is calling the member. It is calling actually this constructor, this second one constructor, and the second one constructor is inherited from the main class or the base class. Now let's create an example and you will see. Here I'm going to create a class individual, and then we will have two data members or properties. For example, member of string data type equals no value, and then num of members equal 0. And then I'm going to create two constructors. The first one will have one member, and now I'm going to use an underscore here to differentiate between the member or the parameter of constructor and the property of the class. So the property of class is simple member, and the member of or the parameter of constructor is underscore member of string data type, and then the body of the constructor. And again I'm going to copy it, pasting, and we will have num of members. So now inside this, here I have to declare the data type also. Inside this second constructor I'm going to write member, which is the property of the class, equals underscore member, which is the parameter of the constructor. Again similarly I'm going to write num of members, the property of the class, and then equals the parameter of the constructor. So now whatever the value member holds will be assigned to this parameter of the constructor. Then I'm going to write the print line statement to print our member. for example member. Similarly, print line to print our number of members. Now outside this class I'm going to create a new class which will be inherited from this individual class. So the keyword class, and then the name of the class, for example student, and then individual class. It is inherited from the individual class, and then we will have the body of the class. So now inside the body of the class we will inherit these constructors. So I'm going to copy it, okay, and paste it. So now what I have to do is here the body, and now you can see we have errors. This is because we haven't inherited them. So we have to use either this keyword or the super keyword. So when we use the super keyword will call the function, the super keyword will inherit the function, and this keyword is used to call the function of another, to call the constructor of the same class. So here I'm going to use this keyword to call the constructor of same class, and I'm going to pass the values. For example member, I'm going to pass of string data type, and then another value, for example 12. Okay, and now here we have to use the super keyword. It means I'm going to inherit this constructor from the main class. So super, and then we will have member and number of members. Okay, so now I have created a base class which has two properties, member and number of members, which are initialized to null or 0. Then we have two constructors. The first constructor contains one member, the second constructor contains two members. Then inside the second constructor I have initialized the members of the constructor. So now this member of this is the property of the class which is assigned to the parameter of the constructor. Similarly, the second property is assigned to the second parameter or argument of the constructor. Then in the next line we have used the print line statement to print these members. So the values of this member will be passed from where this constructor will be called. Now here in the child class I have inherited my constructors. The first one constructor uses this keyword to call the constructor, and the second constructor uses the super keyword. It means that it is inherited from the base class. Now in the main function I'm going to create variable or the object of the student class. For example obj is the object, name of the object, and then I'm going to create student object for the student class. Now I have to pass some parameters. So here if you see, when we call this object, when we create this object, the constructor will be called automatically. So when the constructor is called, this constructor will be called. So inside this constructor we have used this keyword which calls the constructor of this class. Then we will have our output. Now when you create the object, you have to pass the parameters. This is because the constructor contains parameters, but here we have to pass only the member. And the member will be, for example, student. So now student is passed to this constructor, and inside this constructor we have called another constructor using this keyword, and then the string which is student will be passed and 12 will be passed, and then this body will be executed and we will have our output. Run, and you will see student and then 12 is printed. So member is printed and 12 is printed. So what is happening here, the second constructor is inherited from the main class, and when you call this constructor, actually this keyword calls the constructor of the same class. So when you use this keyword, this constructor is called, and when this constructor is called, it is actually inherited from the main class. So the control is transferred to the body of this constructor. So this is how you can use the secondary constructors in your program. So thank you guys for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.